Hello, I'm back. My name is Matthew, and I'm continuing with my answering the Q&A questions. We're on to part 2 and question 6. And this is from Dean Ambrose. Congrats on reaching 4,000 subscribers. My question is, are you familiar with the works of the Russian author Ivan Gonkarov, specifically the novel Oblomov? I ask because he's not as well known as the rest of the famous 19th century Russian writers, at least not in the West. I read it last year and I thought it was really good. I agree. I have read Oblomov. If you're not familiar, it's, it's an unconventional novel, especially the beginning, where Oblomov is this character that just won't get out of bed. We spend like the whole beginning of the book with a main character that's just basically just bedridden, lazy, and won't get out of bed. I don't remember the specifics. And there's also this servant. There's if I remember correctly, there's a servant type character that's really funny. Again, lazy, but he's supposed to be attending to the house, and instead he's like in the kitchen. It's cold outside and it's cold in the house. The Oblomov is just kind of tucked under all these covers, and the servant's in the kitchen just sitting on hot pots and pans, like burning pots and pans to keep himself warm. I do recommend it. It's a funny book. The whole book's not it's not all just him in bed, but it's surprising when you come across it, and really great, really great. Number 7, question number 7, is from Gregor Samsa. Congrats, man. I was wondering what are some of your favorite fictional characters? Also, is there a book you can think of that brings you the most joy? I've read some very sad books recently and need a break. LOL. I think I connect with your bookish thoughts more than anyone within the whole Booktube universe. How incredibly kind. Thank you. You have a clarity in your videos that I cannot find anywhere else. Cheers. Again, thank you so much for the kind words. What was the question? What are some of your favorite fictional characters? For television, one of my all-time favorite fictional characters, it's from the Andy Griffith show. Andy here is named after the main character. It's Sheriff Andy Taylor. But who's a great character? My favorite character on the show, of course, is Deputy Barney Fife. One of the all-time best fictional characters on the small screen. And Barney Fife is this fiery, hot-headed, proud, and extremely fragile man. He has a fragile ego. He's incompetent. He's hapless. He takes his job very seriously, and he's really bad at his job. And when he gets fired up about something, you will not see more of a powder keg on a television screen than Barney Fife giving someone the riot act. It's the best. And it's just an incredibly great character. All the little details about him, and what makes it so great, because he is this incompetent laughing stock in the town of Mayberry, is his relationship with the Sheriff Andy Taylor. They're friends. And even though Barney Fife isn't a very good friend to Andy, he does undermine him a lot and doesn't trust him as much as he should. sometimes betrays him. Andy, Sheriff Taylor, always has Barney's back. He's just this incredibly reliable, loyal friend to Barney Fife. There's an episode where Andy Taylor went out fishing with someone that lives at like the big city. I can't remember the name of the city, and the person says, you should come up to the city and have dinner at the Esquire Club, one of those gentlemen's clubs. And Andy says, anytime I go to the city, I often bring my deputy. Do you mind if I bring him along? And the guy says, any friend of yours is, of course, welcome. And this dinner is an invitation to be potential club members for the Great Esquire Club. And Andy explains to Barney that there's this club, we can go up, we're going to have dinner. And Barney, of course, just completely overreacts. He thinks that they need to go in there and act like these big hot shots, and he's saying, we got to talk about stocks and how the oil market's going and steel, and Andy's saying, we don't have any stocks, like we don't have anything. And Barney's saying, well, they'll think that we're rich. And Andy's like, well, that's kind of like lying. And Barney goes, no, we just have to say, like, hey, the steel stocks went up. We're not lying because we're not saying we don't have steel stocks. But since we're kind of happy about it, they'll think that we are. And he's like, that's about as close to lying as you can get. And Barney's bragging about it. He's worried, of all things, about how Andy is going to do. He thinks he needs to spruce up Andy. They go to the Esquire Club. Barney makes a fool of himself because he's trying to pretend like he's someone that he's not. Doesn't understand the game of golf, yet he's talking about golf. They're bringing out dishes that he doesn't know what they are, pretending like he does. At the end of the episode, the guy and someone else, they come back to Mayberry, and Barney thinks that it's a shoo-in. They're just waiting for this phone call so they can be part of the Esquire Club, and it's a great big deal. They'll have their connections. And the guy comes in and says to Andy, he's by himself, he goes, of course you were accepted. You can be a part of the Esquire Club. And Andy says, well, what about Barney? And I say, he is not Esquire material. And Andy politely declines, and he says, he might be my deputy, and he might be a little funny, but he's my friend, and we're awfully close, so there's no hard feelings. Thank you for the invitation. You're always welcome here. We can always go fishing. And then Barney comes in, and one of the great things about the show is there are real human interactions, these moments. Barney comes in, and Andy doesn't hide anything. He just says, I have bad news. One of us didn't get in the club. And just very, very straight and honest, one of us didn't get in the club. And Barney is just so angry, and he's punching his hand with his fist, and how could they? And he says, well, if they won't let you in, Andy, I'm not going to join either. And the look on Andy's face. Anyway, what was I talking about? Favorite fictional characters. Of course, I'm sure he meant literary characters. And there's a lot. It's going to be the characters from my favorite books. Don Quixote, just one of the all-time great characters, fully realized. Alyosha from the Karamazov brothers, I just recently I read it a few times, and I've really warmed up to Alyosha. His kind of tenderness and the sadness in the way that he sees everything that's going on around him. Bouvard and Picochet, the novel by Flaubert, Bouvard and Picochet, two of my all-time favorite comedic characters. So yeah, I'm sorry I went on a rant about the Andy Griffith Show. Question number 8. Congrats on, and this is by KMM. Congrats on 4K. What is your favorite bookstore? I think we live in the same geographical area, so just wondering where you find new and used books. So, I don't go to bookstores very often now. A lot of the books that I get are online. For the longest time, I went to the Ivy bookstore on Falls Road in Baltimore City. It recently relocated. It's still on Falls Road, but it's farther south. It went from being in like a shopping center, a store in a shopping center, to being a standalone house that was converted into a bookstore. In the old location, I used to go there quite often. It was small, but it had a great curated selection, and I knew the owners. I don't know if the owners that I was acquainted with still own the new store, but I had a really good rapport with them, and they would take suggestions. If I remember at some point, I talked to one of the owners and just said, like, you have a poetry section, and you don't have Byron, Coleridge, Shelley. Like, you don't have any of the romantics. You don't have any of them. I don't know how that could be. And the next time I went in, or at some point after a while I went in, and they were there. So that's pretty cool to have someone that you can talk to, and they would give suggestions to me about books that they think that I might like. Let me know there's a new translation out by Pever and Volonkonsky. One of the best bookstores that I went to, I say recently, I think it was like 2 years ago, was I think in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and it was the Midtown Scholar bookstore, and that one was a used bookstore and a new and used bookstore. And it was like going to the Strand in New York City. Just a properly, hugely well-stocked bookstore that has traffic in there. There's constant new books going in, books being sold, new books on the shelves. Of course, this is all before the pandemic, so I don't know what it's like up there now. For me, that's like maybe an hour and a half drive, and I've only been there twice, but it's worth the drive. If you're looking to go to a bookstore and shop and spend an afternoon, it's worth an hour drive. Okay, thank you for the question. Let's see. Question number 9. Question number 9. From Elspeth Neville. 4K milestone is well deserved. Your genuine love of books, respect for reading, and unpatronizing presentation makes your channel very attractive. Thank you. Incredibly kind. Are your cats indoor cats, or do they roam outside? What are your interests other than reading or Booktube? Andy and Daphne are both indoor cats. They've never been outside on their own. And there are a few reasons for that. The biggest reason is probably my own um, tendency to be nervous, protective. Um, if they go out, I don't know that they're coming right back in. Of course, I have neighbors and people around that have indoor outdoor cats. Um, the some people, the cat will go out overnight if it's a nice temperate weather, and that the cat will just come back in the morning. I would be having a fit. Some people that go to work and the cat's out, and they come home and the cat's at the doorstep, and then you go in. I just couldn't handle it. I need to know that they're safe. Um, they're my little friends. They're my roommates. Um, but I'm also their owner, and I have to be their guardian. Now, some people, what that does mean is that I am essentially taking away um, their liberties. They don't have uh, the same kind of agency that an indoor outdoor cat would have. But all I know is that they're very happy in our home, and the house is built in a way that um, seems to work very well for um, the life of a cat. All sorts of levels, there's all sorts of windows, lots of things to check out and investigate. There's toys all over the place, lots of nice places to take naps and sleep and be happy. And I had a bad experience with a cat that got outside. I've had two bad experiences, but I'll mention one. My last cat, I was late teenager, 17 or 18, something like that. My friend Monica had a cat named Syphil, and I knew him when he was a kitten. A couple years go by. Monica's moving to California, knows that I was friends with this little cat. We had a good. Syphil loved me. I loved him, and she said, "Will you take him?" And I was living with my parents at the time, and I talked to my mom and dad and explained the situation, and they said, "Yeah, you can bring the cat here. The cat can live here." And I was stupid. I just made several stupid decisions. So, like, Syphil loved me. We got along great, happy as could be, just like Andy here. Trusted me, all of those things. But cats are not dogs. A dog, if a dog trusts you, it trusts you completely. Cats don't trust people or anybody completely. There are very strict boundaries as to what is acceptable for a cat. I go over there without a cat carrier, and my plan, this is what I did, my plan was to pick Syphil up, hold him, get in the car, and just have a loose cat in the car. And it's about a 30-minute drive from where Monica's house was to my parents' house where I was living. And now I just have a frightened cat going bananas in the interior cab of the car, having a fit, screaming, yelling, hollering, not safely contained in a cat carrier, but bouncing all over the place. Finally settles down from exhaustion and gets into the passenger seat and is just crying, to the point where it sounds human, and that wailing, like siren of a cry. I'm talking as calmly as I can be. We're almost there. We're getting to the house. Everything's okay. We're safe. And Sipple looks me right in the eyes, and he poops. He has a panic poop. Poops in the passenger seat footwell. Stinks up the whole car. Now there's poop in the car, driving along. And the next stupid decision that I come up with is my parents are going to judge that poop. They're going to think, well, this isn't a very nice cat. I think to myself, I need to get rid of the evidence. I need to get rid of the poop. That way when I come to the house, there's no poop in the car from the cat. It's a bad first impression. So I'm just 5 minutes away from my parents' house. There's a shopping center. I forgot to mention that it was raining, not heavily, but just a very consistent shower of rain the whole day, whole night. I pull into the shopping center. I go to the back of the shopping center. There's a whole row of bushes. It's empty. My plan is to get out, get the poop out, get back in the car, drive to my parents' house. I open the door. Like a bottle rocket, Sipple shoots out and runs to the nearest hedgerow. Disappears. Now, I've told Monica that I'm going to be taking care of her cat. It's been about 30 minutes, and I've lost the cat. So I'm completely beside myself. I'm out there calling his name, Sipple. He knows me, he trusts me, but now I've put him through this whole ordeal. He went from an hour ago being in his bed, now he doesn't know where he is. Completely traumatic experience. He's in these hedges, it's raining, it's cold, and I'm just calling his name. Call my parents, have to explain a whole series of stupid decisions that I've made, putting me in this predicament. My parents come up, they're out there calling his name. My mom is behind the hedges, and she goes, "I got him," and she comes around the bushes with a cat, and I go, "Mom, that's not Sipple." She never met him. The cat goes out. I go to the shopping center. I had a grocery store. I go over there. I buy a can of tuna. I realize I don't have a can opener. I have to call Monica. She's at work. Hours go by. It's nighttime. My mom and dad at one point said, like, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. The cat's gone. And I say, I cannot leave. I can't just go home now. Monica was working at a restaurant. She gets out of work. It's now like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. I should mention, before Monica got there, the police were called. Behind the hedgerows, there's suburban houses and things like that. I don't know who called the police. Police officer shows up, and it's this woman in uniform, and she says, I got a call because of a suspicious character. I'm the suspicious character. I'm outside yelling Sipple. Nobody knows what Sipple means. For hours. I explain all of this to the police officer. She kind of laughs at me. She says, "I'm just going to pat you down, and then good luck." She pats me down and leaves me. Monica's on her way. So Monica arrives, gets out of the car, and she yells Syphil's name. She goes, "Syphil!" And he darts and practically leaps up into her arms. The cat's saved. We have Syphil. We get the cat back in the car, go to the house. Andy strolls into the living room, his new home, and practically just passes out in the middle of the living room, utterly exhausted. I don't have very many good experiences with cats outside, to put it mildly. You had one more question. What are your interests other than reading or Booktube? And it would be painting. I have my easel over here. I don't paint very often anymore. I used to paint as much. I used to dedicate as much time that I do now reading to painting. I would just read. I would paint hours every day, every night. It's not so much the case anymore. But I still love painting. So we're at 26 minutes. I have to change the lighting somehow. So I'll go on to part 3. Again, thank you. If you're watching, thank you. I'll be right back.